Hey, welcome to episode 12. Yep, 12 of the Cellarcast. You might be wondering, if you're a regular viewer of the channel, why there was no video on Friday or Saturday or Sunday. And that's because I think I'm getting a little burnt out. I'm going to be perfectly honest. I love making videos, but when you kind of just do something continuously for I was putting out a video like a week for several, like a year. I'm actually coming up on my year-long anniversary of making videos, which is kind of a little surreal. And yeah, you might kind of slow down a little bit. I'm somebody who can I think I might, I might just need to introduce a little more balance into my life. I used to, around the time I was doing a bunch of, early on in my channel when I was doing the Konami videos, or the Konami video, around that time, I was, I had a really good schedule. I was making videos, I was doing writing because I am a writer. If you go on my website, you will be able to find some stuff that I wrote in high school. Don't read Hangman. Don't read Hangman. That's the second draft of basically a book series that I wrote while I was a junior and senior that I feel a little embarrassed of. It's not finished. The second draft is unfinished. There is the original first 2.5, 2 3/4 books somewhere else on the internet, but you'll never find it. You can go read the short stories though. The World at Night, I think those are really good actually. I think those hold up. But anyway, I had a really good habit. I was basically keeping a good schedule of writing, making videos, and then I was also learning Japanese and all that. And then I had a really bad, would it be a spate? I guess. I had a really bad spate of anxiety that kind of crushed basically everything else in my life and kind of debilitated me from doing anything but making videos, which was also very difficult, but I did it every week. And the channel was kind of the only thing that I was doing for a while. And I think I'm just a little burnt out, so which is definitely my fault. I need to do some balancing. I was looking at the upload history, and there's more and more times where there's 2 podcasts for every 1 video, and it feels, I don't know, sometimes I feel lazy and bad, and I get more anxious about it. Don't worry about that, by the way. I'm going to see help, so maybe that was a little personal, but yeah, that's what's going on with the channel. I just gotta recover a bit, and then I'll be back to making stuff. Now, luckily, I think that my most recent stuff has been really good. So there's that. There were no comments last week. Well, there were, but there was no questions. You gotta ask a question if you want to end up on the... I'm not just gonna read your thoughts out loud. So the first story is about NBA 2K22. Let's read this. This comes from Kotaku. Jake from State Farm is in NBA 2K22. So, the funny thing about sports games, like the 2K series, the Maddens, the FIFAs, is that people just buy them every year because the main market is very casual players who just kind of buy sports games every year. And that's, that will inevitably basically be, I'm pretty sure that 2K and EA, they all have the copyrights locked down on their respective sports. They have the exclusive licenses to use those players and the branding and all that. And they're the only ones that are gonna. Basically, they have a monopoly on their games. And I've heard that that has slowly ruined Madden over the years. My brother used to buy. We used to have so many sports games, so I know this. My brother was huge back when we had a Wii. This is in like the early mid 2010s. We had a Wii, and then later a PS3. But he legitimately had so many sports games. It was like absurd. And so I got to see from the sidelines. I got to watch because I wasn't playing with him. We never played games with each other. I got to see from the sidelines the progression of the various. Do they even make the NHL games? I guess they. NHL 2K? Oh. Discontinued after the release of NHL 2K11 in 2010. Oh, the brand was revived on mobile devices in 2014. Huh. Okay. I never knew that. I guess sales? Yeah, hockey is like not a. I don't know. Hockey is not like a big enough sport outside of a certain couple areas. But yeah, we had those because we're from Chicago, and then we had a 2K. When people say 2K, they literally just mean the NBA 2K because that's like the. I don't know of any other 2K series. Yeah, it. The funny thing about this is that like, they'll just buy it every year. Like my brother was one of those people. Well, he got my mom to buy it every year. And this is what slowly killed wrestling games because like, oh, people will keep buying it, so we could just let the quality slip, and then it slipped a little too hard. And wrestling games, also wrestling kind of dropped off in popularity in America at least. And eventually you just end up with like, yeah, we can just put whatever in. And there's just, do yourself a favor and look up NBA 2K voice acting. There's a couple different compilations of voice acting because they have like a story mode, I guess. They have like a story campaign, and they got the real players to voice themselves in the campaign. And I don't generally like to mock someone for not being good at like reading or anything, or people are good at different things, and some people are good at basketball and they're not good at other things, and some people are good at reading and other people they're good at different things, and I don't like to mock people for that. At the same time, it is really funny because, I mean, listen to it. I can't even do it justice. I really can't. Like, pause, go listen to NBA 2K. I think there's like a 2K15 voice acting compilation. It's the funniest thing you'll hear this week. It's like, wow. In some way, it kind of adds to the immersion because it's like, wow, I really believe that is like, I'm listening to a pro basketball player who has like a third grade reading level. I didn't want to be mean. It's just like, wow, I can hear you reading off of the page. It makes you appreciate like even decent voice acting, like, the industry standard, you might say, of just people who are able to sound like they're naturally speaking, right? Because you can really like, I'm listening to these reads and it's like, wow, I can see the guy in the booth struggling to reading like one word per second, trying to get through this line, and I'm like, it kind of paints an interesting kind of, you know, narrative. You're seeing the struggle. At the risk of sounding like an asshole. Anyway, I don't feel bad for mocking the Jake from State Farm inclusion. So, I vaguely remember this of they introduced these things called like parks and stuff into 2K, where they it's basically like, I don't know why the first thing I thought of was Wizard 101. I woke up from a nap like 30 minutes ago. The Wizard 101, like the little circles you would walk into, where there would be like, you could participate in players' battles, like live. Basically, the parks were like, from what I remember, like little courts, like little multiplayer courts that you could go join, and like you could walk around and stuff, and then like join games. I guess they expanded it to, let's see, features a career mode. This one's coming from Zach Zweisen, I guess. Career mode, letting players create their own basketball-loving character who can move them through a storyline, working their way up the ladder and into the NBA, and eventually into famous NBA superstars. The city is an online hub that lets you take your created character out of the court and into an open-world city filled with different buildings, activities, and content to explore. It's also like the rest of any modern NBA 2K game, filled with microtransactions and ads. Yeah, the idea is honestly like kind of neat, like an open world basketball game. If you had like a basketball MMO, that would be kind of dope. But yeah, you know, I feel like it doesn't have to be said that it kind of just sucks when you pay $60 for a game. And did these games release at $60? So NBA 2K22. 2K22. Is this retailing at 60? Wow, the box art for this is so much better than the last Madden one. Oh my god, literally the first thing that comes up is on the sidebar, the little Google sidebar, is this story about Jake from State Farm. How much did this retail for? Oh, okay, it's the anniversary edition. I saw $99.99 and my head was spinning. Okay, $60 for the regular version. Wow, the box art's really nice. It's like a nice piece of painted artwork. This should just be what it's like every year. That's kind of nice. I actually like that. I remember, was it 2K21 that had the terrible? 2K21 looked fine. It was the Maddens, right? Madden 20 that had, it was like Madden and FIFA. No, Madden looked fine. FIFA. I can't keep track of these things. FIFA 20. 21? Yeah, the FIFA 21 box art. It looks like a what would you say? It looks like a college student, like the graphic design is my passion level. Well, the Ultimate Edition looks kind of nice. It's got like a minimalist thing going on. It's just like a black and white picture of like a player just kind of walking. That looks better. Yeah, I got off topic. Yeah, it almost feels pointless because I remember when games started doing this, when they started coming out at full price, and then also coming with microtransactions, and it was like, I don't know if I've ever played a game with that wasn't just like DLC, right? Like, do I even own any games like that? Can you do that in Mortal Kombat X? I don't know. I have 100 minutes in MKX. I guess SF5. I don't know. It's not something that I'm really into. buying a game for full price and then they're asking you to spend more, that feels a little disrespectful as a customer. And I remember there was a push from a certain portion of the gaming population, and then there were some really egregious examples because they were trying to test how far they could push it. And then, people just kept buying sports games. And then you're like, okay, I guess I'll just go away then. It's the most cynical. Oh, I can feel my heart falling as I think about it. It's like, well, I can lobby all I want against this kind of business practice, but at the end of the day, people are just gonna buy a Madden again. People are just gonna buy 2K again. All right. Okay, they're just gonna keep letting them do this. Yeah, I guess being served advertisements it's okay in sports games. Like, I've grown to accept it as someone who doesn't play them. It does kind of match, right? It does kind of match the vibe of watching actual sports, but having this bit where you can walk up to the Jake from State Farm booth and your character's like, whoa, it's Jake from State... Isn't Jake from State Farm white? Wait, has he always been black? Jake from State Farm. Jake from State Farm. Has he always been... No, he was definitely white. I guess he's black now? There could be multiple Jakes, I'm not saying that. Had to be he was recast. Huh, okay. What happened to the original? I guess it happened last year? Okay. Wait, I'm just gonna speed run through this. Yeah, Jake from State Farm. He's the guy who's like, khakis? That's the one. Fuck, this is a long article. So why did he get recast? The original Jake did great at delivering his famous line. However, this expanded role is very demanding. Okay, so did they... Huh? What? Oh. The punchline of the commercial, which is "C sounds hilarious." I can't believe... I don't even want to explain it because I don't want to believe that you existed in the last 10 years without seeing the Jake from State Farm commercial. So the punchline of the commercial, "She sounds hideous," became a point of contention for the transgender community, who were upset at the implication that a deep voice indicated a hideous woman. Really? I thought it was just the wife being spiteful. Okay. Alright. Okay, I assume the joke was just that the wife was being spiteful. In response, another version of the commercial was released by State Farm with the punchline taken out. What's there's no punchline? I guess the khakis. Okay, that's kind of funny. That's okay. Okay. Jake was recast. Although he quit the company for a while, the original Jake still works at State Farm, so the recasting had nothing to do with actor availability. Oh. I'm getting really into this story. The remade version of the commercial starring Mims. His name is Kevin Mims. Mims is an interesting name. More dislikes on YouTube than likes, and a lot of angry comments to match. Wah! This guy misspelled skeptics in his article. He spelled it with a C. That's funny. I don't... Okay. This is like a Medium article, so I really don't know. I'm worried that this is going dangerously close to making some kind of a weird political thing. Anyway, I guess Jake from State Farm was recast at some point, and now he's walking around the city. Where the hell is this article? and he's saying, "Hey, I'd like to welcome to the city. It's me, Jake from State Farm." And I'm a big fan of you. Wow. And then your character goes, like a good neighbor. It's the most surreal thing I've ever seen. I don't know why that really captured my imagination. Have I been spending 20 fucking minutes talking about Jake from State Farm? Jesus Christ, can we get to the first actual news story? Okay, so China, if you remember from last week, they put the clamps down on gaming time for youths, any minors which are under 18 in Chinese law, restricting them to about 3 hours a week of game time, and specifically an hour a day on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I think like 3 hours on holidays. And we talked a bit about how it's going to kill the games market in the long run over there. So this new article comes out, again from the South China Morning Post, again from Josh Ye. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm sorry. I feel like I should know. I feel like it should be simple. It's 2 letters. Who's been covering basically China's gaming scene and their regulations. He did the article last week. He did one before that. So, China's regulators said to slow their approval of new online games as Beijing's campaign against gaming addiction heats up. So, this is really interesting because they are really going hard at this addiction thing, this gaming addiction thing, that it seems to be entirely ideological or philosophical, depending on how you want to look at it, rather than economically driven. So it doesn't like make any sense to most people, but that's how it's one of the few countries, I guess, that regularly operates like that. So China they have to approve every game. New online games. Okay, so Chinese regulators have temporarily slowed their approvals of new online games in the country, dealing a fresh blow to gaming companies like industry giants Tencent Holdings and NetEase, as Beijing steps up measures to tackle gaming addiction among young people, according to people with knowledge of the matter. So supposedly there was a meeting called by the regulators on whenever Wednesday was when this article came out, led by the publicity department of the CCP and the gaming watchdog, the National Press and Publication Administration, to discuss with representatives from Tencent and NetEase how they will implement Beijing's new restrictions on video gaming for minors. That's the game time limit. So, from what I understand, I don't know if it's just online games or if it's any game, but China does have an approval process for what games they allow to be sold in the country, which makes sense. Yeah, I mean, there's ratings boards. Basically, they're taking over the role of what the ESRB or PEGI or CERO are for their own country. It's regulated by the government rather than an independent institution. Which of course has, both of them are subject to, both of those approaches are subject to flaws in their implementations. But I don't know how games are rated for Steam. I guess they don't have to go through, if I just click on a random game that was only ever released. Are there games that are not rated by the ESRB on Steam? I mean, there have to be. There's like indie games and stuff. I don't know how that works. But it's definitely, I feel like, if I jump to like, what's a little game? Ultra Fight Dekyanta 2. Yeah, let's look at, is this ESRB rated? No. I guess there's just, Yeah, so not everything has to be rated to be sold in the US or for you to buy it in the US or wherever you want. Um, it's just a matter of, what the content that's included in the game and stuff like that. So they have to approve, just kind of like this is what they also do with their movies and stuff like that. They have to approve what comes into the country, and they have a supposedly this is significant in some way. That is currently on hold. So, new game approvals would be on hold, quote, for a while because the priority was to, quote, cut the number of new games and reduce gaming addiction in the country, which is the world's biggest video gaming market. Yeah. I kind of despise this just from an intellectual standpoint, I guess, because oh, yes, it's the drugs' fault. You wouldn't get addicted to the drugs if they didn't exist. I think I've talked about this before, but yeah. Drugs do not make people addicted to drugs in the vast majority of cases. I'm sure something's happened where, drugs have been around and, oh, let me try, or something. I'm sure it happens. It's just like the overwhelming majority of drug addiction is by drug addicts are victims of other things, including themselves. Banning drugs does not do anything to slow drug use. In fact, it's probably just all you're going to see is an increase in probably illegal piracy. Not to say that there's a legal form of piracy, but all you're going to see is a boost in piracy, or an article on the side actually says China's hard stance on video gaming puts spotlight on gray market. It's like, yes, that's exactly what happens, and you know why? It's because you haven't actually addressed the problem. You've addressed the symptom of a problem. And it's not a case where addressing the symptom addresses the treating the symptom treats the disease. You gotta help people. You have to give people some human rights. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to do it. You can't just ban video games you can't just ban video games as a replacement for oh, I see you guys wanted free speech. Well, we've got the next best thing. We're gonna ban video games. Oh, thank God. Oh, thank you. You fixed my problem. Oh, you guys don't want to work... What is it, the 996? You guys don't want to work 9 hours a day, 6 days a week? Is that not a fulfilling life for you? Does that make you want to maybe not be alive? Well, we're gonna ban video games so that you can focus more on your work, guys. Here's a interesting little added detail. So in addition, video gaming companies were directed to cleanse their video games by removing what authorities described were the wrong set of values. That's in quotes. The wrong set of values, including worshiping money, which I don't know what that means, and quote unquote gay love. Oh dear. I don't know how people are just okay with this. It really astounds me how in this day and age, in current year, you can have people so up in arms about the most minute, meaningless things, and then an entire government with significant economic weight in the world market comes out and calls gay love the wrong set of values, and people are just okay with that Nobody even talks about it. Really? Like, we're just okay with this? We're just gonna be... You know they're committing an active genocide right now? Are we just okay with this? Are we just not gonna talk about it? I have a lot of distaste for the Chinese government. Not Chinese people. I have no problem with Chinese people. Well, I'm sure there's some bad ones. And I guess Chinese people do have to run the Chinese government. But, you know, as a concept, I'm not opposed to that. I really think that in the next, like, 20 to 30 to maybe 40 years, we're going to look back on current-day China as, like, Nazi Germany. I really think we're going to be like, wow, how did we just let that happen? How many times are we going to do this, guys? How many times are we just going to let this happen? I'm feeling too cynical. I don't even want to talk about it. Here's a fun one. I'm gonna skip ahead. This was gonna be a little later. I try to order them. I try to paste them, but I'm getting too down in the dumps thinking about the CCP. This one comes from Event Hubs. Former Capcom and Street Fighter producer wishes he could have stopped bad box art Megaman from ever existing. So this was written by Dakota Dark Horse Hills, who I've totally seen this guy before. He is the lead reporter and general content analyst at Event Hubs. He has the I recognize him because his picture is him in a Joker from Persona cosplay. Not the Joker, just Joker. Yeah, so basically, apparently, so Yoshiki Okamoto, an early producer in the Street Fighter series and executive producer of later Mega Man titles, recently discussed bad box art Mega Man in a video on his YouTube channel. So, quoting, so this was translated by Rockman's Corner, or Rockman Corner, which is a great website. Oh yeah, I wanted to mention this. So Rockman Corner is a Mega Man news site. It's been running since 2008. It's run by a guy named Brian, aka Proto Dude. And recently there was a like a Mega Man rope. So several years back there was like a Mega Man like Robot Master Field Guide, which was basically a collection, like a guide to every single Robot Master with a bunch of like, it was basically a bunch of fun facts and details and little stats about all of them up through Mega Man 10. And it had it's notable because if you look up one of the things that's neat about it was like if you look up any of the given Robot Masters, because the games were, you know, obviously made over such a long period of time and the art styles of the concept art evolved so much, it's like, okay, you know, a Mega Man 8 Robot Master concept art looks way different from the official art for like a Mega Man 2 character. And it was just a nice opportunity to kind of like standardize all of the artwork. And so if you look them up now, like you go to the wiki or something, look up any given Robot Master character, it'll be the artwork from that book. And I actually own it. It's great. In the back, speaking of China, it says that Mercury from Mega Man 5 on Game Boy, Mercury is actually a socialist. And because of this, he has no friends. I'm not kidding. Look it up. It says Mercury from the Star Droid from Mega Man 5 on Game Boy has he's a socialist, and because of this, he has no friends. I'm almost quoting directly from my memory. Anyway, they were doing they did like a Maverick. They did a Maverick field guide to all the Mavericks from the Mega Man X series to kind of do the same thing. And is it out yet? I want to pick it up at some point. Maverick Field Guide. Maverick Hunter's Field Guide. Pretty sure it's out. Yep. Yes, I want to pick this up at some point. As just because, you know, I feel obligated to. But in the beginning, in the preface or in the credits, I guess there was some assistants. There's some credits, like special thanks to people who helped out with writing the book and providing information and research and stuff. And in that list was two guys from the Megaman community, Shadow Rock ZX and Proto Dude, who runs Rockman Corner. I was like, yeah, the boys made it. That was really cool. Shout outs to them. Anyway, so this one's coming from Rockman Corner, really. So Okamoto he was, you know, one of the original producers on Street Fighter and some of the later Mega Man games, and I guess he was asked about. Okay, so recounting his early days at Capcom before quote unquote rising to the top, Okamoto had this to say about the Mega Man 1 box art, which I'm sure you're familiar with at this point. It's one of the most infamously bad cover arts in any video game. He says, man. So he says, so the overseas version of Rockman's called Megaman. Have you ever seen the package illustration? It's an old man in blue tights wearing a helmet. He's standing in a bendy crab pose with a tube in his hand. And I couldn't believe this was allowed to happen. It's like, I'm sure everyone hates it. I mean, we made this game together, you know, but because it had to cross the ocean, we had to listen to the opinions of the marketing staff over there at Capcom USA about what's appealing and popular. If I had more authority then, if I was stronger, none of this would have happened. That's what I thought. As a matter of fact, I still think about it. In the end, if I had the final say, I could have said no. Oh man, dude, this guy is literally taking it to his grave that he let bad box art Mega Man happen. That's really funny. So if you don't know the story behind why the cover art looks like that, is that it was an infamous rush job. They basically got this artist to do like a painting for the cover, but they only showed him. Some sources you'll find will say that he never saw the game at all. That's a lie. That is not true. He saw 5 minutes of gameplay of Mega Man 1 on a crappy CRT in 1986 or whatever, like right before the game was supposed to come out in America. And the reason that on the cover Mega Man's like torso and bits of his armor are yellow, like the reason he's yellow is because the CRT, the monitor that they were looking at, the TV had like, you know, it was like a crappy CRT, and the colors were kind of distorted. So the cyan, like the light blue on Mega Man, looked yellow. It had like a yellowish hue to it because the game was like a gross washed out color. So the only thing he could pick out was the dark blue on like his arms and most of the helmet and the legs, like the boots and stuff. And then someone's walking outside. And then if you actually look, you're like, oh, the yellow bits are all the parts where Mega Man is like cyan. So that is the backstory behind bad box art Mega Man. Is someone fucking outside my room? I don't know. I hate. Anyway. What is this? I can't read that. I'm trying to read like the question. Rokuman no something. Chunri? If I'm reading that right? Chusori? Fuck. there's some letters in Japanese that are identical to each other, and it kind of sucks to read, especially if you're reading fonts. Yeah, it was just a really dumb. There's so much like stupid stuff from that era of like, no, you can't sell that to an American market. They won't like it. Like the cover, like the box art to Final Fantasy VI, which is 3 over here. Like I think that's one of the most infamous cases where like you look at 6, the Japanese cover, and it's like this gorgeous piece of artwork by Yoshitaka Amano, and it's so unique and captivating, and like, what is that game about? Like it really like captures your imagination. And then the American cover was like, hey, like purple gradient background with throw some concept art of Mog on the front. Yeah, that'll sell. The Yankees will eat that up. And you had this same like, we have to change. No, we have to market to the little kids. It's like little kids have no taste. Little kids have no taste yet. You are shaping their taste by assuming what they like. I'm really glad that we have since moved away from that, and Japanese games are free to just, present themselves as they would without like, oh, we have to change this for the overseas market. They're not gonna understand. They're not gonna understand what a rice cake is. We're gonna change it to a jelly donut. Just a little fun, lighthearted story. This one was pretty interesting. There was a decision a few days ago on the Apple versus Epic court case. It's over, guys. Please excuse the noise in the background. Certain elderly members of my house like to just walk around while I'm recording. I was basically predicting that. Actually, it's funny because exactly what I predicted came true a few episodes ago. I said there was that separate case about Apple was forced to allow app developers to direct users to payment sources outside of the App Store. Basically, they could send you to go pay on their own website or through their own service where Apple didn't get a cut of the commission. And I was like, oh, this means that probably they're gonna lose technically the Apple, or they're gonna. What I expected was, or what I said should have happened was, Epic should be allowed to direct users to the Epic Game Store. However, they did blatantly disrespect Apple's policy at the time. And so they should probably pay for that just for the sake of fairness. And that's exactly what happened. So, this one comes from 9 to 5 Mac, written by Chance Miller. That sounds like someone who does TikTok. I'm just going to be straight up. So, the ruling from Judge Rogers comes after Apple has already announced a handful of App Store changes over the past week, including allowing developers of Reader applications to link out to a website for account management. However, those changes by themselves are not enough to satisfy the new ruling from Judge Rogers, however. He's going harder. He's taking it further. So, to summarize the ruling, basically, Apple cannot prevent developers from including in their apps and metadata buttons external links or other calls to action that direct customers to purchasing mechanisms in addition to the in-app purchasing. And they can't stop them from communicating with customers through points of contact obtained voluntarily through account registration within the app. So they can put you on a mailing list. Or basically it gives them less control over, like, you have to do everything through the App Store. So the injunction is set to go into effect in 90 days. As written, Apple must allow developers of all applications, not just reader applications, to link out to third-party payment solutions. Most notably, this includes the highly lucrative games category. So, at the same time, Epic still has to pay Apple. They have to pay them 30% of the roughly $12 billion in revenue they collected from the time of they did that they opened up that they violated the policy to between August and October 2020, plus 30% of any revenue Epic Games collected. Okay, so from the start of the lawsuit to today, basically the date of judgment. So like that's really not a whole lot. Let's do some quick maths. 1 2 12 1 6 7 7 1 9. So 12,167,719 dollars, and 30% of that is, how do you find a percentage? Is it times 0.3? Okay, so 3 million, a little over like 3.5 million, plus whatever 30% of the revenue they got between the dates is. Okay, that's pretty light for a company like Epic. So they really got off scot-free. They really got off scot-free with this one. However, in a way, so did Apple, because the court also did not conclude that, basically they said the court cannot ultimately conclude that Apple is a monopolist under either federal or state antitrust laws. So despite the fact that they have over 55% of the market share and extraordinarily high profit margins, these factors alone do not show antitrust conduct. Success is not illegal. Yeah, basically, there is other stuff on the market. There is the Google Play Store, and then even on Android devices, there's plenty of other third-party app stores that you can download. So it's really not a total monopoly. They just have a very dominant market share. So the App Store is not in violation of antitrust law. This is coming from Apple. Yeah, they basically are just like, we win, Tim Sweeney. We win. Why don't you Fortnite? Why don't you Fortnite? I'm really sorry. I tried to come up with something on the spot. You ever try to come up with a joke on the spot, and you're like, yeah, you make like a connection in your head, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna make the joke, but I have to capture it quick before the moment's gone. And then you're like, yeah, I can just say stuff, and then it'll come out right. Let me just wing it. And then it comes out and it makes no sense, or it's really bad, and you were like, I probably needed to spend a little more time with that. That was me just now. I'm not taking it out. I'm not cutting it out, because this is entirely uncut, unfiltered Taigen, alright? When I was looking up, so for some reason the first article that got linked on that story about the Chinese regulation, the first one came from the Daily Star, and I don't know why. Why that was the first choice, but so I had to go to the Daily Star, which I never wanted to do. And while I was there at the top, there was a weird I caught sight of, in addition to a bunch of trash celebrity meaningless. Did you see what she wore on Instagram? What? Heads are turning. You know, just garbage. You know, you gotta get paid somehow, I guess. So there was a review for Surgeon Simulator 2, and I just like read through it really quickly because the headline caught my eye. It was a wild cartoon medical game ruined by poor game control. I'm serious. The review is extremely short, and it basically just goes over, this is what the game is, and it's really funny because maybe it works because you know, Surgeon Simulator is an interesting thing because it's a type of game that only really gained any kind of popularity or only started really existing in like the 2000s. When did QWOP come out? You know, it's in that like let's see, 2008. Yeah, it's in that category of like kind of experimental, like I call them wacky physics games, of where like the game is supposed to be unwieldy. Like that's the idea. It's kind of like a really interesting really interesting concept actually, because the enemy, the actual obstacle you have to overcome, is the controls, which is kind of rare, but it's like it's made to be clunky and weird, and that's part of the fun. You know, it's not fun for everyone, but like the entire idea of the game is, because usually they have very simple objectives and nothing too complex. Like when you play a game that has bad controls, which doesn't happen very often anymore, but when you do, what sucks about it is like, okay, these controls are not supposed to be bad, right? They just are, and it's because of something else that it's impeding you from what you actually want to do in the game. But with a game like QWOP, it's like the entire idea is that it's difficult and uncomfortable to control. It's awkward, and there's like a certain humor to come from trying to figure it out and trying to, you know, games like Getting Over It also kind of fall into that a little bit. Although I wouldn't say that games controls are bad. It's just unorthodox, I suppose. I think it's kind of fun, you know. It's a fun like. I think it's a good thing to have in the greater gaming landscape, that there are games that like that really play with extremely like, I guess you, man, I want to stop burping during these. That you get to, what the heck was I talking about? I just completely lost my train of thought. That you, these meta ideas, the kind of meta ideas like bad controls. And for a normie audience, like people who would read the Daily Star, Surgeon Simulator 2 probably doesn't make any sense. It's kind of like Undertale, where you need some context to like really understand it. Like, I remember there's is it Rasputin? I don't know how his name is pronounced. Rasputin? Razbuten. He does a series, or he's done a couple videos on his channel about, it's called like What Gaming is Like for a Non-Gamer. If you haven't seen it, you should totally check them out. They're pretty interesting. And it's basically him with his wife, who does not play video games. So he's like a gaming YouTuber, I think full time. And he makes videos about video games. And his wife does not play games. She never grew up with them. It's just a thing that her husband does that she just kind of watches from the side. And she kind of like asked him, every now and again, like that she was interested in like checking it out for herself, just to sate her curiosity. And so he did these videos of like, okay, picking some games for her to play that she might like, that she might not like, trying to give her a wider taste, of what's out there. And they're really interesting. They're really interesting, actually, with like the stuff that she struggled with and the stuff that she enjoyed and the stuff that she kind of like hated in the moment but ended up enjoying later. And it was really interesting. So he did a couple of these. And I think the most recent one was, or the third one at least, was what RPGs are like for a non-gamer. And RPGs, you would think that they were like, they'd be pretty easy to get into because they're very casual. They're usually more about, experiencing a story and all that, and are usually not super gameplay intensive, right? Like they're not, like I think in the first episode he had her playing like Doom 2016, and it was like, okay, yeah, she's it goes about as well as you'd expect. But like, okay, having someone sit down and play an RPG, especially like a slower one or a more methodically paced one, might be a lot easier for someone to digest. She ended up, the problem was he picked like a couple games that he wanted to try, but he was trying to figure out what order he should have her play them in. One of the games he had her play was Undertale, and I remember like thinking like, okay, Undertale is a decent choice. It's definitely interesting, right? It's an interesting choice. And then he's like, yeah, so I did a poll and everyone said that you should do Undertale last. So I had her play it first. And I was like, no! No! Don't do that! Don't do that! It's like showing... it's a little difficult if you're... Okay, Undertale is a game... Because, like, naturally she hated it. She didn't get it. Because Undertale is a game that relies heavily... A lot of the concepts that it explores and the ways that it kind of twists the formula of a traditional RPG rely on... Appreciating them kind of relies on you having at least a basic understanding of RPGs or just gaming as a whole. Like, oh, the goat's name is Toriel, like tutorial. Oh, okay. And then the idea of like having non-violent ways to deal with enemies. Okay, that's kind of nifty. Oh, you like have to like talk to them, and they have all these like unique interactions of like, oh, you talk to the blob and he starts crying or anything like something like that. And as someone who is somewhat experienced with RPGs or knows about them or gaming in general, you can play that and be like, oh, okay, I see what he's doing here, even if you aren't really into it. You'd be like, okay, I see what the idea is. When she played it, it was like, what am I doing? She's like, I'm just walking around, like, running into random battles that I can't see. It was also her first introduction to random encounters. And she was like, just getting annoyed because she's like, I'm just walking around and then suddenly the game grinds to a halt so that I can press charm on a frog. And she just didn't get it. And it's like, yeah, of course she didn't get it. She has no context for any of this. It's a game that relies so heavily on you understanding common tropes or just kind of the ways that games in general are. It's too subversive for a casual person to like really understand, which is why like if you never like really don't recommend Undertale to people who are not into games. Like really don't. It's not a good idea. Because they're just not going to understand it. They might be able to have some fun with it, but the likelihood is high that they're just going to bail out because it's too, in some ways, satirical and referential, and they're just not going to, they just won't get it. Yeah, it's a really interesting series. Surgeon Simulator, to go back to this review, he just basically spends the entire review talking about, oh my god, it's so unplayable. Trying simple things like picking up a syringe to inject your patient or a hammer to crack his rib cage is often way too difficult. And it's like, yes, that is the point. It's, yeah, other than that, the rest of the review is... The rest of the review is just kind of like explaining things in the game. So if you want to know, there was a question last time about why or if I'm ever going to do like more games reviews or more things focusing on individual games. And one of the reasons that those videos tend to be a lot longer for me is that one of the reasons that I like to be thorough is because it's the best way, I think, to talk about games. Or if you're gonna, it's like, if I'm gonna do a review or something approaching a review, I would like to have it be worthwhile. I would like to say something that is at least somewhat worthwhile about the game. So when I was in like high school, there was, I was on my school newspaper, and the second year that I did it, I think, yeah, the second year that I did it, I asked to be on our arts and entertainment section. Or was it the third year? Yeah, the third year that I was on it. I was on the arts and entertainment section. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that was just because it's easy. I wanted to write about stuff that I liked. Like, it doesn't matter. Most people just skim through it anyway. So it's like, hey, let me just take this opportunity to like write an article about JoJo's or Berserk or something like that, which I did. And just try to, maybe if I could introduce someone to it, that would be neat. And what I wanted to do was like the year beforehand, when I was a sophomore, there was this guy who would do game reviews for the magazine or for the newspaper, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I would read them, and I'd be like, this is not a review. This is not a review. This is just talking about what's in the game. It was like the least substantial thing I'd ever read. And I remember like being in a newspaper meeting and hearing the guy talk to someone else, and it was around the time that like Spider-Man PS4 was coming out, or it had been out for a bit, and he was like, yeah, I'm going to do like a Spider-Man review. And then one of the other guys was like one of his friends, I guess, was like, wait, do you even own a PS4? And he's like, nah, but like this other guy does, so I'm just going to have him tell me about it. And I just remember sitting there like, what? What do you mean? I'm just going to have my friend tell me about what's in the game? And I'm going to write an article based on that? What? You can't do that. What the hell? No. So he graduated, and then I was like, hey, now that I'm on arts and entertainment, like that motivated me to like, I already wanted to do it because it fit my interests more and what I wanted to write about. But like, it motivated me to want to like do my own game reviews. And so I did a couple for like what I was playing at the time. I did one on The Outer Worlds, which I really enjoyed. as someone who is super into like Western RPGs. I did one. How many game reviews did I actually end up doing? I'm kind of forgetting. I did one on Guilty Gear, which is kind of like an general overview of like the appeal of the series. This was well before Strive came out. And that was fun. I'm trying to remember, like, what other games I talked about. I like can't remember, but I would do like talking about games every now and again. And I wanted to, even though I had like a pretty tight word limit, like five. Sometimes it would be like, what would it be like 700 words? No, that's way too few. But like not a lot, right? Like not a lot of page space. So I had to like, I wanted to say something meaningful and give a good overview of the game or whatever I was talking about, but I also I had to stick within certain constraints. So when I, started doing YouTube, it was like, oh, now I can actually go through as minute detail as I want of talking about the stuff that matters to me. That sometimes I just wasn't able to talk about on the newspaper, like the sound design or the controls or, the way that a game controls and sounds and looks is important to me, like the game's presentation. I remember there used to be like here's a throwback. I don't know if anyone listening was around for this time or if they remember it, but in like the 2010s, there was like that big push for photorealistic graphics in games, or like more realistic graphics. More realistic, which of course all that stuff has aged terribly. Original Skyrim looks pretty dog on by today's standards, and that was like groundbreaking graphics for the time. And there was this really interesting period of growing pains for the industry because it was starting to become mainstream coming off of the 2000s. Where like, okay, now there's like an adult market for video games and there's this and that. And you had this weird kind of like conflict between people who were like, they only cared about graphics and specifically graphics being more realistic. And then you had the other camp, which was in response to that, because there was like just a ton of total meatheads who were like, they would look at something like Okami and be like, that game looks like shit because it's fucking or Wind Waker. Oh, that's a better example, dude. It is so crazy. It's so crazy because I grew up at a time where Wind Waker was still contentious, which is crazy to think about now because everybody loves that game now. But like, it's I feel so. Do people remember that? Do you remember when everyone hated Wind Waker because it didn't look like Call of Duty? Because it was like cel shaded and cartoony, and people were like, "That's a baby game." Do people remember that? That was crazy. That was a real thing, and I remember that, where like there was a period where, just because of like console release cycle, it didn't get a remake until the Wii U, or a re-release until the Wii U. So it was only like people. There was, the GameCube didn't sell too well. There was a limited amount of people who actually played the game. A lot of people just looked at it and were like, "That's a baby game." And so there was this like weird friction of, I remember just not even hearing any opinions about the game, about like actual criticism or praise or anything like that. Just, this one is contentious, and it's entirely because of the art style. And specifically the art style because of the time it came out, because people were so one of the reasons that Wind Waker was so polarizing or surprising when it was announced was there was a demo at Space World or something that showed a more realistic, grittier Zelda. Basically, it was like Link fighting like one of the, what are they called? Like Black Knights or like Iron Nuts or something like that. And everyone was like, that's what the next Zelda's gonna be like. It was also a time of great insecurity for many gamers because you had this, it was like, okay, here's this hobby that was niche and looked down upon by many people, especially in like media and stuff like that, and you're wasting your time and all this. And you know, when now it's like interesting because games as a whole kind of progressed in maturity, sort of, as the years went on. And I think it's because, like, okay, the people who played on the NES in the 80s were kids, and then a certain amount of those people kind of, you know, lose interest in it, a certain amount don't, and they become preteens, and the Super Nintendo comes out, and then maybe they get a little older, and some people lose interest and some don't, and some people are, you know, kids now and they get their Super Nintendo and they're like, wow, video games. And then they get a little older and then it's like, oh, now you got the PlayStation, you got the N64, you've got games that are a little more mature, like it's stepping up slowly and slowly. You've got Resident Evil, you've got a variety. I think the PlayStation was great in this regard because it had such a wide variety of games for different people. And I think one of the reasons that it was such a huge immediate success and the brand just exploded was like, okay, if you're a kid you can play Spyro or Crash Bandicoot, and if you're an adult you can play stuff like Resident Evil, and trying to think of other more adult-oriented games or more mature games on the PlayStation, and they're all escaping my mind, but you don't even have to know because you don't even have to hear it because you already know. Words are hard. And then, you know, it just kind of progresses with like okay, PS2, Xbox era, and then around that time it was like, okay, there's these people who have been gamers for a while, and now they want to be adults. They want to feel like adults, guys. So if you grew up with Nintendo, and now you're a teenager, or you're in college, or you're or whatever, and you want something, you want your hobby to kind of grow with you, and you want to be taken seriously, right? You're like, I'm an adult and I love gaming. I love video games. I don't want to give that up. But people think I'm a loser because I play games. I want to be taken seriously. Which is where, like, that's also around the time that you saw the, like, are games art discussions start to crop up, and, like, that's how David Cage got away with way too much. David Cage got away with way too much. Because people wanted to be taken seriously and they wanted to be respected. And really the most mature thing is to say, I don't care what you think, I'm going to like whatever I like. And I'm not going to care about what the game I play looks like. I'm just going to enjoy it. And I don't care about what you think. And that's really who the cool people are. However, a lot of people we're not that cool, and that was not a common sentiment, because I doubt many people even, you know, were self-reflective enough to understand that, you know, in a broader scope. But it was such an interesting, like, it was such a try-hard time in gaming. They were trying, like, games were trying so hard to be edgy. I'm talking about, like, the, you know, going into the mid to late 2000s and the 2010s. They were trying to be mature. They were trying to meet their audience. But at the same time, their audience wasn't that mature. And it was also all being run by people who were, like, 50-year-old marketing executives who were trying to relate to 15-year-old boys who wanted to feel like college frat guys. My second ever video was actually about this exact thing, because it was about weird like mid-2000s game promos, and it was such a weird situation because it was such a cluster of factors that made it not age well, let's say. Because it really was like, okay, you had teenagers who wanted to be treated like adults. And so, but like, not like a boring adult. Like, you don't want to be like, the adulthood as a teenager that you want is basically being in college. You want to be in college because that's where you have like basically responsibilities, but like, oh, I'm still in school, and you have that like structure, and you're not thrown out into the wasteland of chaos that the world is. So you have teenagers who want to be basically college kids. And then you have 40-year-old and 50-year-old marketing executives who are trying to market to those kids, to those teenagers. So it's a 50-year-old's idea of what a 15-year-old thinks a 23-year-old is like or wants. And you end up with like a bunch of embarrassing nonsense that looks really stupid in retrospect. Thankfully, we've moved past that. Thankfully. Ooh, it used to be so bad. It used to be like legitimately embarrassing, right? It was because I was, around that time I was still growing up. I was a kid, but it was like being caught in this weird scenario of like, okay, this is being aimed at a very specific market that I really actually don't fall into because I'm too young. So like, you're just kind of looking around at all of these people who are just trying, they're stumbling around, and like, it's such a weird impression as a kid to look around and just see all of these supposedly professional things completely flounder but have this veneer of like production value, but at the same time they're doing like just stupid. What's a good example? I mean, I did the thing about like the worst game marketing stunts and stuff. Anything from that video, like the freaking Dante's Inferno. Oh, that was a bad one. Just things that were trying way too hard to be cool and respectable. Because paradoxically, the harder you try to be mature and cool, the less the less mature and cool you look. I'm really glad that we're at a point now where something like what's a good example? Something like something like Overwatch can come out, which is something that has, like a teenage, more adult audience, but it has like a bright, colorful, appealing art style, and it's not military shadow man, gun, Afghanistan, war crimes, war crime denial simulator, PTSD simulator. It looks silly to people on the outside, but you have these people who are like, in their 20s or whatever, and they're like, no, please take me seriously, it's art, no, look, no, just like, there's this game, it's called Heavy Rain, and and it's like a movie. Oh, that was also where the frickin' horrible trend of the Citizen Kane of gaming comes from. Oh, I'm so glad that's dead. I'm so glad that's dead. Maybe younger listeners won't remember this, but there was a time in the 2010s where this insecurity was not just on the ground floor of regular old gamers, but also games journalists who I think just felt, not all of them, of course, but I think a lot of them felt insecure about their chosen sector, right? Like, I'm a journalist, but like maybe they go to parties or something and they're like, I'm like a journalist, I work for this website, and they're like, oh, what do you report on? They go, I'm a gaming journalist, I talk about video games. And I've experienced this to some extent because, you know, I'm not in college. I talk to adults or something, and they're like, oh, so what are you doing? And I'm like, they're like, so what college are you going to? Because they just assume you're in college. And I'm like, I'm not really going to college right now. And they're like, oh, so what do you do? And then I have to look them in the eye and say, I run a YouTube channel about niche gaming stories and history. And some of them think it's cool. Some of them think it's like legitimately, they're like, oh, that's really cool. What do you make a video about? Like, what's your last video about? What's your channel called? Some of them are really cool about it. Some of them you can like I can visibly see their eyes change, right? They go from like bright, like interested to, oh, okay. Yeah. And it's like, oh, it's the worst feeling. It makes me feel so dumb. It makes me feel so stupid. And you know, when I'm on my own in my room, I'm like, you know, I don't care about those people. Like, I don't care about what they think about whatever disapproval or disappointment they might have. But in practice, like when it happens, it never feels good. And you try to, oh no. It never feels good, but it's just, I can imagine a journalist being in that kind of situation. Right? Oh, good. Okay. I had a little thing I was playing with, a little metal thing on my. This is called, I think it's like is it called a wing nut? It's like you put it on a thing and you twist it and it like unscrews a certain type of screw. I've just been playing with this for the last like 15 minutes. But yeah, I can definitely picture them going to some kind of like press thing or talking to their girlfriend's parents, and they're like, what do you do? And they're like, I'm a journalist. And they're like, oh, what do you write about? Oh, I write about video games. And their girlfriend's parents are like, oh, really? Okay, wow, cool. And they're like, and they just desperately wanted approval. So this stupid trend happened with like the citizen. There's a Tumblr blog called The Citizen Kane of Video Games. It's like it was a stupid discussion, and it was entirely begun by like people who were insecure about their hobby. And oh my god, there's a Medium article called "Where's the Citizen Kane of Video Games?" Stop doing this, okay? It looks like this looks like a parody game. The Citizen Kane of Video Games on itch.io. Oh, it's just an adaptation of Citizen Kane. Oh, that's kind of funny. Play through every single shot of the classic movie. Oh, that's kind of funny. That's neat. So, let me just... Okay, I have to stop looking at search results. If you look it up and you go to back, there's just a bunch of... This is really dumb. It was people who were like, okay, what is a respectable popular medium? Movies. Movies are respectable. Games are not respectable right now. So what we need to do is like, okay, what's the most respected movie? Oh, it's Citizen Kane. When you say Citizen Kane, when you say like the Citizen Kane of something, it's implied to be the best. It's the best of the thing. And not just the best, but like quality craftsmanship. Something that is culturally significant and respectable, god damn it. So let's start. What would be the Citizen Kane of gaming? And it's dumb because it's just comparing apples to oranges. It's different mediums. It's dumb to say like to legitimately look at like what's the Citizen Kane of books? Like you never ask that. That's stupid. But you know, you go to like liberal arts college and a bunch of like circle jerking professors they just hype themselves up about how good Citizen Kane is so that they can control what is good and bad taste, so they can feel like they have any kind of influence and power over culture. So they just tell you that Citizen Kane is the best thing ever because they just decided it, and it's subjectively the best film ever. Oh, it's the most important. So that when you don't like it, you can be excluded from a group. You can be a rube. I fucking hate art people. When I say that, I mean like the intellectual, what would you call them? There's a term for that. The academic elite. I fucking hate those people. Those are the worst people. I used to submit to a lot of short story contests, and I would just look for like free ones or really low cost ones to send my stuff to. I never won. I never got anywhere. And I was looking at like, you know, one I remember looking at, and it was I was looking through the requirements, you know, like word count or stuff, like, oh, do I have a short story that I don't want, you know, I want to, pardon me. Yeah, I've got a couple in the bag. What's a good one to like submit that fits the requirements of the contest? And I remember looking at the requirements, and it was like one of the contests was like no genre fiction. And I was like, what is genre fiction? This is actually not a term I was super familiar. I'd heard it before, but I wasn't like familiar with it. So I looked it up, and basically genre fiction is fantasy, sci-fi, horror, any of that stuff. And I was like, oh, because literally all of my stuff is horror. It was all of the stuff, all of my short stories are basically like science fiction, sort of, or surreal, like horror stories. That's like most of the stuff, like, or surrealism is what a lot of my short stories fall into. And like, how am I gonna, what? So I was like, okay, this was so new to me, and I was like, genre fiction. So I'm like, what is not genre fiction? So I discovered the difference with a little bit of Googling with these two worlds. Genre fiction, which is fiction that is written for, what would you say? Fiction that's written, things that are written for market gain? What the hell am I trying to say? Basically for to make money off of, to appeal to a market. And the other thing, the other non-genre fiction is called literary fiction. Literary fiction has no real definition besides it's what we have arbitrarily decided is respectable art. It's respectable art. And I was just so baffled by this, because you look at the list of literary fiction and it's like Frankenstein, and I'm like, Frankenstein is literally the first science fiction novel. It's literally the first science fiction novel, and it's like horror to boot, right? And I was losing my goddamn mind looking at this list of like what is considered literary fiction, and I saw Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and I almost punched a hole in the wall. Okay, not a lot of people, I don't know, okay. Great, so every, if you've ever read a Charles Dickens novel, I'm not a big fan of Charles Dickens. I think his stuff kind of sucks to read. It's a real slog, and it's way too long. I don't find his stories that interesting. I would not be interested in them if I was not forced to read them for school. Which, you know, why do so many people hate reading? Oh, it's because you get forced to read a bunch of garbage in school, and like one or two cool books that you like, but it's entirely overshadowed by being forced to read like a fucking 800-page long Charles Dickens novel that you really don't care that much about things that you don't care about. Whew, okay, I'm gonna try and rein this in a little bit. So, Charles Dickens, you're reading his stuff, and you're like, man, he writes a lot. Like, he is so long-winded. He writes so much. Jesus, why does he write so much? And then you find out that he got paid by the word. And you're like, oh, I see. It's long so he could get paid more. And it's hilarious to me. It's really, really funny that you have this stupid definition of literary fiction that it's made for the purity. Let's see if we can try and find what is literary fiction. Literary fiction is a category that's often difficult to explain. Often thought of as serious fiction, and nearly exclusively novels, it's easier to identify literary fiction by what it's not. That is, it's fiction that doesn't fit in well-defined genres like thriller, science fiction, or romance. So science fiction, thrillers, romances, those aren't serious? Okay. Literary fiction, it's quite fluid. See, it's funny the way that they like to describe this. This is coming from celadonbooks.com, because all of this is completely arbitrary, and it's made up to legitimize and delegitimize certain kinds of writing in academic spaces. I fucking hate these people. The category of literary fiction is quite fluid, and for the last few decades has easily overlapped with a number of genres. So whereas genre fiction from romance to dystopian horror is plot-driven, literary fiction is character-driven. I'm sure you could find a gajillion examples where that is not the case. Any action in the story impacts the main character or characters, and understanding this impact is the whole point of telling the story. The overall tone of the book is introspective. Literary fiction, then, is always a study of the human condition, and often an exploration of difficult social or political issues that control our lives. Another way to recognize literary fiction is by its story structure. Unlike, say, thrillers or science fiction, literary fiction doesn't follow a formula, which all science fiction follows. I can't read this. Like, I really can't go on reading this. Big pop-up. I fucking hate this entire dichotomy. Because it's so transparent. It's so, like, when you look at, like, list of literary fiction books. 1984. What genre does that belong to? So, I know 1984 is not science fiction because it's introspective and it has commentary. Well, it has a point, so it doesn't fit into genre fiction. It's like, what the fuck? Who even decides whether or not something has a point? Come on, let's see another one. Fahrenheit 451. Nope, not science fiction. Animal Farm. Well, Animal Farm was about nothing. It was just about animals, you know. I just fucking hate. I'm sorry, I'm going on a big rant. What was I even talking about? Oh yeah, just like people are always like insecure. These types of like distinctions always come from people who are insecure about their hobbies and their interests and what they like. And it's like, okay, well why is Lord of the Rings literary fiction and not fantasy? Why is it not genre fiction? It's like, oh, it's because people will respect me. You know, my colleagues won't laugh at me. I won't get a swirly for liking Lord of the Rings at my at my college. Just funny because I'm sure a lot of people have gotten swirlies for liking Lord of the Rings. Yeah, so games went through this. They were trying so hard to be taken seriously, so hard to be respected, and then something like Wind Waker comes out, and it's like, oh, that's for babies. I can't. Well, it's cartoonish, you know. I need a gritty, serious Zelda. It's ironic because it's Zelda. I need a gritty, serious game. And the funnier thing is assuming that because something has a cartoonish presentation, that it also is made for children, or that it cannot contain any mature themes, which is just false. It's just wrong. It's just not correct. God, there are so many trends that I'm really glad that we left behind in gaming. I could talk about more. I could talk about the weird, borderline racist dismissal of Japanese games in the 2010s by many journalists and people online. But just, yeah, there was this whole time period. It was just so weird to think about. You're like, what? Yeah, where Japanese games were seen as being like out of the, they're out of date, they're clunky, they need to get with the times. With the it was around the time that American publishers and developers kind of just yoinked like 20% or 25% of the market share from Japanese developers in like a single quarter, and really freaked them out. This is how we ended up with things like DMC Devil May Cry, that was just aggressively trying to put on like an American skin to appeal to Americans, to the gaijins, to the Shirobuto. I don't know if that's a slur, but I can say it because I'm white, I guess. Pretty sure it means like whitey or something. Shirobuto. How was I talking about? So there was this kind of like Western pride, like, yeah, we're big dogs now, we're on top. You guys, you know, everything that was done differently, like stylistically, by American games was now, it wasn't just like a different style or a different approach to making games, or you know, it was the new hotness. It was the next level. It was the new frontier. And if you weren't doing that, you got to get with the times. You got to get with the times. You're out of date. And it culminates in, or the best example of this is this horrible video of Phil Fish, who is such a dick. I'm kind of glad that he just dropped out of the industry. He got a little bit of harassment, and he was like, Fez 2 is canceled. Wee. I don't like Phil Fish very much. And a lot of it stems from this horrible video of when he's at a panel, and this guy comes up to ask a question, and it's a Japanese man who works in the Japanese games industry. He's a huge fan of Fez, and he comes up, he's like, I really like Fez, I think it's super cool. I work in the games industry in Japan, and he asks him like a question about like, what are some differences between American and, or like, what are the big differences between the American games industry and Japanese industry, or something like that. He was asking for like, what's your perspective on the two different things? And Phil Fish just is such an asshole. He goes, yeah, you guys fucking suck. You need to get with the time. He literally says you need to get with the times. Like, bah, why you still doing this? Like, blah, blah, blah. And he is such a dick to this guy who was so nice, who was so polite and seemed so cool. And he just takes the opportunity to basically just shame him and his whole country's output of games. Oh, and this was an attitude that was so prevalent throughout the 2010s. The early 2010s, right? The 2000s, 2010s, early. Thankfully, it fell away around, I want to say by 2015, it was pretty much gone, but it was bad for a few years of like, I have this vivid memory of getting a Game Informer magazine, and someone had sent in fan mail. They had a fan mail section at the start of the magazine, and someone was basically extolling how good the plot of the Yakuza games were. And, the Yakuza games, they're known for being very silly, but the main storylines of the Yakuza games are serious, like, played straight crime stories. And the reaction, like, the response to this, like, person who was just saying, like, you should really, like, give some attention to the Yakuza series. They tell some really, like, they're silly on the surface, but they tell some really mature, when you dig down, they tell some really mature, dramatic stories. And the response was literally one line from the editor, and it was like, all right. And it was like the most dismissive thing in the world. And it was like, okay, yeah, silly Japanese game. Oh, those silly Japanese. They're so silly. I heard, anecdotes about people who had friends, and they were friends who were like, oh, well, Braid, having a title screen? Ugh, that's so antiquated. Have you played Braid? Yeah, it's got no title screen. The difficult thing is that this was also at a time where, in some regards, Japanese developers really were behind the times. In some ways, they were dropping the ball. Because they kind of have this habit in the Japanese games industry, because this is just how Japanese business works, of they get on top. Like, when Japanese companies have something to prove, they fucking go hard. Like, they go hard and they put out some really good stuff. But when they're successful, they have a very bad habit of resting on their laurels. And I think Yoshida, the producer on Final Fantasy XIV, actually said this as a criticism, and one of the reasons that the initial version of 14 failed so hard was that team, those directors, did not... He said they didn't look laterally, basically. They weren't looking across the board at their competition or what was going on in gaming, and they made something that was basically like 10 years out of date. They have this legitimately bad habit of becoming complacent. But at the same time, you look at the 2010s, and it's like, there's still like a lot of really good stuff coming out of Japan. Like, let me just do a quick search. 2010s, Japanese games. That's just JRPGs. Best-selling Japanese games of the decade. So just starting with from 2010. These were all released a little later. Let me just click through. Vanquish. Hey, Vanquish. What else was coming out? Capcom was doing good stuff. They were doing like Okami. There was No More Heroes. There was stuff that was more obscure. But Dark Souls. Freaking. I'm really trying. It's really hard to Google this. A lot of them are just list of JRPGs. Let's see. I mean, there were Persona games. There was always good stuff coming out of Japan. It just so happened that there was also an amount of jank, and let's not excuse the amount of jank that came out of Western developers at the same time. I mean, have you freaking played Two Worlds? Have you played Two Worlds? Come on. You're gonna tell me Japan's behind the times? You put out Two Worlds? Hey, come on. Yeah, there was just it was really like borderline racist, honestly. And I'm not someone who throws around that I don't like throwing around those kinds of words lightly, but I remember it, and it was weird. That's why I also say borderline, because it was never like overt, right? But it was when you say that like an entire country's output of something is garbage and just inherently bad, it's like, I don't know, there's like an association that you're building there that is like not good and honestly kind of disrespectful. I might sound like a weeb saying that, but like I'd say that about any culture. If you were to say that about games that come out of I don't know, Spain. And Spain's not a country with a huge gaming industry. They exist, but it's just not as developed. If you want to say the Spanish gaming industry is not as developed, perfectly fair. If you want to say Spanish games are bad, that's just, without even calling it, if you want to say that's not racist at all, it's at least intellectually dishonest, because you're talking in an absolute. There's most certainly some really good Spanish video games, you just don't know what they are. You're not paying attention. You have a bias that is cropping up. Oh, I could talk forever about just these stupid trends and things that happened in the games industry around that time that just stem from this like insecurity. And it was so funny too, because it was like, games are serious, guys, and at the same time you have just like Dead or Alive coming out, and it's like, games are serious, guys. And it's like, bro, chill out, just calm down. Here's some advice for anyone who feels insecure about their hobbies. Just chill out and people will respect you so much more. People get like kind of, I have played a part in legitimizing a lot of interests for people around me, right? Like, I remember being into anime and stuff where like no one else was. And I was just able to, people believed that I was not, a mouth breather or whatever. And just by me, it was really interesting because just by me taking something like anime or video games, you could have someone who didn't understand or respect those things at all, or have any interest in them, who maybe had a preconception that was a little dismissive, and just by me talking about it seriously, because I talk about games seriously, I talk about these things I treat it seriously. Not so seriously, but I talk about it with like respect, right? With like I talk about it in a what I think is a mature way, and I've seen like the looks on people's faces change as I talk about something, where you can tell like you start off and they're kind of dismissive of something, and then the more that I talk about it, you can kind of see they're like, oh, okay, huh, all right. And just by being cool and calm and talking about your hobbies in a way that's not obnoxious, which again, this all requires, social skills, some kind of social awareness. Just doing that will do, and talking about it in a mature way and like an intelligent way will do so much more to legitimize whatever you're into naturally in the eyes of people who maybe didn't take it seriously. It will do so much more to that end than any amount of like David Cage games. Oh, I'm never gonna stop making fun of David Cage. Throwback to when his company got sued by, or taken to task by the French courts for horrible sexism, and he ran out of the courtroom crying, saying, you are attacking my company and my employee, my life work." Oh, David Cage. Oh, I want to do a series almost. I kind of want to do a series on David Cage of going through all of his games. I want to call it something like Rage in the Cage or something like that. The only problem is that I would have to play Omicron first, and I really don't want to play Omicron. Any other game is like, you can just kind of, whatever. It's basically just a movie that you play, but I really don't want to play Omicron. I feel like it would be a quiet man situation where I just lose my goddamn mind. Anyway, I've been talking for long enough. We're closing in on around 2 hours. Look forward to probably a video next week. Or sorry, this Friday? Probably, I'm assuming. Hopefully, again. I'm going through some stuff. But, yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave a comment asking any questions below. I will definitely get to them next time. However, you do have to ask a question. Yeah, this has been a blast. I'm coming up on, in November is going to be a year of me making videos, which is a little weird. Got about 2 months, and I want to do some, maybe like a special anniversary thing. I don't have anything else to say. Do I want to plug anything? Oh yeah, there's this really neat little cute game that I've been playing called Of Mice and Sand. It was actually published by Arc System Works. It's basically a little pixel art game. It's in a pixel style, and it's about mice in basically like a little kind of like one of those the big machines that the Jawas are in Star Wars, like just a big machine with a bunch of rooms in it, like a big vehicle with a bunch of rooms in it, and it's on like train tracks, and it's in like a desert setting, and you're going around picking up scrap and crafting things, making little rooms on your sand crawler, and going to different like locations and accepting quests to like craft things, and it's really fun and cute and kind of with a little bit of darkness in it. Really neat. I would totally Of Mice and Sand. It's on Steam. I would definitely recommend checking it out. It's a fun little game to play in the background, or it definitely comes across like a game that someone had like a really strong idea for, and they just made the game they wanted to make. So yeah, check that out. Go play Of Mice and Sand. Bye.